Over the last 5 years or so, I've discovered my love for From Software, starting with my first run through Dark Souls 3. I've gone on to play all 3 Dark Souls games, Demon's Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring, and I love all those games. Okay, maybe I just like Dark Souls 2, but that's not the point. From Software basically created their own new offshoot of third-person action RPGs, and ever since those early days of Demon's Souls on the PS3, no one has ever really been able to match their consistent quality, level design, and game feel. In 2022, Elden Ring came out and won tons of Game of the Year awards to almost universal praise, and I played that game all the way through twice now, and I'm eagerly awaiting the Shadows of the Erdtree expansion. Luckily for me, as I patiently await for them to cook, 2023 was a surprisingly great year for non-FromSoft Soulslikes. The question is, are they still playing catch-up, or have they matched their inspiration? Worth acknowledging real quick that while From did not put out a Souls-like game this year, they did release Armored Core 6, a game I very much enjoyed, and while I cannot speak to previous Armored Core games since this was my first one, I did notice some Soulsy gameplay elements here and there, but a Souls-like would not be the first thing I jumped to describe AC6 as. So to start off, what exactly makes From the masters of their craft? Why are their games always so universally loved by the fans, and as time goes on, the wider gaming audience? If you ask somebody to describe Dark Souls who has only heard of the games but hasn't really played them or given them a shot, they'll probably describe them as difficult games. And that's not an incorrect statement, but it doesn't tell the full story. From's games are challenging, but in most cases, that challenge is rewarded with some of the most fulfilling moments in games in my opinion. Going into a new boss in a Souls game can feel daunting, but it's learning what makes those bosses tick, when to dodge, when to get aggressive, when to run and heal, that feels so good. The games don't baby you. They want you to use the skills you've been building as the game goes and challenge yourself to execute, and in my opinion, nothing feels better than pulling off a new boss fight for the first time and getting that huge outpouring of souls to level up. The games are not hard for the sake of being hard, they are demanding, but meeting that demand feels incredible and they give the player plenty of tools to fight back. From's games are also known for their fantastic visual design and environmental storytelling that immerses the player in whatever messed up world they've stepped into. An incredibly smart level design that will both reward the players for exploring and going after tough enemies, and will also punish players for getting greedy or sometimes for no reason at all other than to be funny. Shout out to those rolling boulders that seem to show up in every game.
Oh, bye-bye. Bye-bye! Okay, get out.
So now that I've kind of set the table a bit, let's talk about some of the releases from 2023 that scratched that Souls itch and why I was really impressed with them. There are several games I want to touch on this video, but the 2 that really pushed me to start thinking about this are Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen. Both these games released in the back half of 2023, and I really enjoyed both of them. Lies of P actually ended up in my top 5 games from this year. These games both mimic a lot of the gameplay systems and design philosophy of From Software and their games, but add their own unique twist to help continue to push the genre forward, which is really what games should try to do when they're taking clear inspiration from something. Starting off with Lies of P, right at the bat, this game looks like a From game right down to the menus and fonts. When I first tried the demo, I was actually kind of surprised just how much the game was clearly going for that look. But after playing it, I was happy to learn they met their end of the deal too by bringing a really in-depth new world of their own with a collection of bosses that I thought were mostly really fun challenges. Krat is dark, damp, creepy, but so beautiful at the same time. NeoWiz and Round 8 Studios did a phenomenal job with this game. It looks extremely good and performed even better. I don't think I lost even a single frame that I noticed while playing this game, and it did not crash a single time. That's something I don't want to take for granted nowadays. Lies of P has the same level design theory as the pre-Elden Ring From games, with levels full of enemies that are smartly distributed to test you and to guard the good items as you explore. Each area folds upon itself with shortcuts, hidden side areas with chests, NPCs with side quests, all while maintaining a clear path forward if you just want to book it through. As far as I know, all of Lies of P's major areas were required, so I could have used some optional side areas and bosses peppered in as I went, but that wasn't a huge mark against it. Lies of P draws from several From games to both its benefit and its detriment. Benefit in that it had some good variety in the combat, detriment in that it did not master any one area in my opinion. The Legion arm reminded me a lot of Sekiro's prosthetic arm, giving you some creative freedom in how you want to build your character. If you want to play defensive, the Aegis arm works as a shield. Or if you want to be hyper aggressive, there's the puppet string arm to pull enemies towards you, or later even move you towards the enemies for a big attack. There are also the more traditional ranged options, filling each of the status types with fire, electric, and poison, but I just stuck with the Falcon Eyes arm, which basically was a gun that I could use in combat to get quick, safe range damage in. The guard regain system seems to draw from Bloodborne, allowing players to regain lost health if they hit the enemy back in time. This, however, relied on a parry system that I never quite felt confident enough timing-wise with, so I did not really utilize it. I never really blocked too much in this game, just rolled around like a maniac, and that worked for me. But the coolest new things Liza P brought to the table, though, was the weapon assembly system that allowed you to mix and match the blades and handles of all the standard weapons you find to make something that works for your playstyle. The blade half of the weapon mainly controls the base damage and damage type, while the handle affects the weapon feel and what moves you can pull off. I think this system really fit well into the world lore-wise and gameplay-wise, really allowing the players to get weird with their builds and make their characters feel unique, which is also a really important aspect of character progression in these games. Liza P also has the more traditional skill tree that can affect things as straightforward as the number of heals you have, to more complex things like how effective your dodge is and improving the perfect guard ability. Liza P was very close in my opinion to not just being a Souls-like, but rather the quality of a true From Souls game. I look forward to the DLC and its inevitable sequel. Some people saw Liza P as a Bloodborne clone, but if you're looking for something more of a Dark Souls 3 energy, there's always Lords of the Fallen. Lords of the Fallen is a sequel to a game of the same name from 10 years ago, but I have not and probably will not ever go back to this one. But Lords of the Fallen 2023 was really good. This game did a lot of the things I mentioned Liza P did well: good level design that folds back on itself in cool creative ways, a really well built world I wanted to learn more about and was excited to explore, and really solid Souls combat and fun character progression and equipment. There are two things though I thought Lords of the Fallen brought to the table that really helped it feel like its own game. The first of which was the biggest hook of the game, with the Umbral Lamp. This lamp allows you to peek into or outright travel to the Umbral region, which is basically the Dark World version of this game. While the game is already dark fantasy, the Umbral region is a twisted, even more messed up version of that world that incentivizes exploration and brings on an added challenge. You can either choose to go to the Umbral region on your own volition, or can get sent here for a second try on death. I thought this was a really cool idea and made for some added complexity on how I went about exploring each level. It did, however, become a bit tedious by the end since I was basically playing every area twice, but finding secrets and good items to reward my curiosity felt like a good trade-off. The other thing Lords of the Fallen did surprisingly well was multiplayer. If you've ever played a Souls game, you know the co-op multiplayer can be overly tedious and obscure at times, making use specific items, restricting where you can and can't go together, being sent back to your own world after death, making for just an overall tedious experience. But in Lords of the Fallen, it is much more streamlined and worked really well. Just go into the menu at a vestige, this game's bonfire, and join a friend. Now you can run through areas together with no real restrictions. If you die, if you don't get sent back, you can just respawn with your friend. It blew my mind, but you can even fast travel together, which was really neat. I had not messed around with this much in my first playthrough, but I'll definitely keep it in mind for when I replay it next. A big thumbs up from me for the work done by Hexworks here. At the end of the day, both Liza P and Lords of the Fallen were great games to me, but neither of these two games checked all the boxes in my opinion. Both checked enough to make them well worth the time for any Souls fan though, and brought plenty of new ideas to the table that I would not mind seeing From Software take inspiration from in their future games. Outside of those two games, there were a couple other examples of the Souls genre making its way into more and more games this year. One I finished recently was Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is very much a sequel to its predecessor, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, in design, but both these games clearly take some cues from the Souls games. If I had to describe what Jedi Survivor is, I would call it a 3D Metroidvania with some Souls-like combat. It also has surprisingly great platforming. What makes this a cool game from the Souls-like standpoint is the combat is not front and center focus, rather being a supplemental element of an otherwise different game. It is very much a Metroidvania first, with you solving puzzles, using new platforming power-ups to find collectibles, and so on. On the combat side though, Fallen Order has a great parry and posture system that reminded me a lot of Sekiro, where the way to succeed in combat isn't always attacking, but rather deflecting enemy attacks to break their posture bar and then wailing on them for big damage when they're stunned. The skills you unlock help build out your moveset as the game goes on, and the force powers add that special touch to the combat that makes this game have its own flavor. The stems are clearly just Estus flasks, and the meditation points work just like bonfires too. The Jedi games are kind of like if you mashed Metroid Prime and Dark Souls together, and then the player was able to force push stormtroopers off of cliffs, which is a great direction for games as far as I'm concerned. Speaking of great directions for games, Remnant 2 is another game I'm interested in checking out down the line. This one kind of skipped me, but I was talking with a family member over this holiday break, and it sounds pretty cool too. It's basically a third-person looter-shooter Souls-like. I might have to go check that one out. The last game I played though that I want to touch on is Long Fallen Dynasty, which also somehow came out this year in early March. Feels like an eternity ago, but it was another solid entry in the Souls-like genre this year. I've not played the Nioh games, but the way I understand it, Wolong is to Sekiro as Nioh is to Dark Souls. It is very parry-focused, maybe even a bit too parry-focused if I'm being honest. Much like the Nioh games, Wolong is separated into several standalone levels you go into from a menu screen, some taking 2 minutes and some taking half an hour. One of my biggest complaints with Wolong is I don't think it pushed back quite enough on the player. Once I got a hang of the parry timing, which was very forgiving, I was able to steam through most of the game with no issue outside of a couple specific bosses. Either way, it still made my lizard brain happy getting and upgrading new equipment and making all my levels go up, up, and up as I slaughtered my way through it. I might go check out the DLC one day, but I was unable to as of this video. So to round back to my question of, are other developers still playing catch up to From Software? Yes, I think they still are. No one has quite been able to capture that magic of what makes their game so special, but I do think people are getting closer. Devs are only going to keep getting better at making games in this genre and iterating on it with their own twist to keep moving it forward, and that is very exciting to me as a fan. Whether it's games like Lies of P that are Souls-like games through and through, or games like Jedi Survivor or Remnant 2 that are bringing in elements of Souls games to improve another genre, I'm game. Feed me more. Soon though, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree DLC will come out, and that's all I'll be able to think about. Thanks for watching. I was planning on working on my top 10 games of 2023 video after my top 5 Switch games video I did a couple weeks ago, but this idea came to me and I figured I would knock it out first. I love the Souls genre, and this year was such a good year to be a fan of it. If you liked this video and want to throw a like on it, that would be appreciated, and if you want to see what I talk about next, feel free to subscribe. I think I am going to make the Better Late Than Never top 10 for 2023 next, so off to work for that. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.